So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in today's session. I am Siddhant. I'm going to be your host for today. I am currently the head of business for the EMEA region here at Spendflo. So Spendflo essentially helps businesses to manage their SaaS buying process, which in turn helps customers to save up to 30% on their SaaS purchases. Just to dwell a little bit on the topic for today's discussion. Eyes on the price, SaaS pricing trends in 2024. What we've seen is the business landscape is continuously evolving, and more so in terms of the SaaS business. I've been in the SaaS business for about 10 years now. What the trends were before 2020 to what we are seeing today, and even during the pandemic. So there has been multiple changes that have happened. So what we primarily would like to cover today is from two perspectives. Number one is going to be from the seller's perspective in terms of how should a certain company plan their pricing strategy. And the other perspective that we are going to be looking at is from the buyer's perspective. What are some of the key metrics that any buyer needs to be looking before they go ahead and purchase any SaaS tool? And to discuss this with us, we've got Daniel Todinov, a seasoned finance leader from Payhawk. So thank you so much, Daniel, for joining in. I'll quickly pass this to you to introduce yourself, and we'll get started with the Q&A after that.
Hi, Siddhant, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure. So prior to joining Payhawk, I had been in investment banking for 6 years, doing various projects in M&A, capital markets, advisory services, etc. And actually, the most interesting projects I've been part of were related to technology. So after the pandemic, I decided to join the tech industry, and I led the finance function of 3 smaller companies, but all leaders in their fields in Bulgaria. And for the past 2 years, I've been part of Payhawk. Since then, we've grown more than 6 times, so it has been quite a journey. At Payhawk, I'm responsible mainly for financial planning, budgets, and pricing. And what does exactly Payhawk do? We are a leading spend management solution for mid-market and enterprise businesses throughout Europe, the US, and the UK. Payhawk is an integrated platform designed to service the CFO office, combining company cards, reimbursable expenses, international bank payments, accounts payable, and seamless accounting software integrations into one single product.
Wonderful. So I'll just get started with this, right? So one of the first things that you mentioned was regarding moving from the M&A business to tech. So you've spent about 2 years in the SaaS business now. So just wanted to understand some of the key pricing trends that you've noticed, and what do you think is like the big game changer that you've seen?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Allow me to take a step back. Like overall economic uncertainty in 2022 and in 23, and the so-called VC funding winter in the tech we've all witnesses have been a real game changer. And over the past 24 months, investors have also shifted focus to margins and efficiency rather than top-line growth at all costs in the software industry. And given this new environment, companies have become increasingly focused on pricing decisions and efficiency. And just to give our participants a bit of numbers, for 2021, the overall funding, global venture funding was around 700 billion. 2022, it is down to 462. Wow. And in 2023, it's down to 285 billion. Which is the lowest since 2018. Year over year, this is down 38%, and versus 2021 is down 60%. So yeah, in this context, and as a result of this environment, we've identified 3 major pricing trends in the past 24 months that are here to stay. And this is number 1, increasing buyer power, putting pressure on prices, and more focus on vendor due diligence. And with Payhawk also witness a greater shift to buyers, holding the increasing bargaining power. especially when buying software solutions from startups and scale-ups. And in that regard, we have an increasing number of companies who are performing proper vendor due diligence during the process. This is number one. Number two, we've witnessed longer sales cycles, and also huge importance is put on return on investment of the tool itself. Let's say overall sales cycle have increased in the past 12 to 18 months, as customers are reluctant to buy SaaS products which may or may not use, or whose return on investment is unclear or cannot be quantified clearly. Let's say amount of cost savings, man-hour savings, etc. And as a third trend, we do see heavy focus on usage and value-based pricing, as well as more and longer paid trials. And the overall trend has shifted towards this, enabling more businesses to align costs with the value they perceive. And also we've witnessed customers who request paid trials more often and for longer periods of time, up to 6, sometimes 9 months, which hasn't been the case in the past, let's say, year and a half.
Got it. I think, yes. So, Zabrid, I mean, this makes a lot of sense, right? Which essentially brings me to the first point that you mentioned, where the finance leaders have stopped thinking about growth at any cost, and that has been replaced with sustainable growth, where you're moving towards profitability, which means, gone are the days where we're giving longer trial extensions. You're more conscious about what you're using, and you're looking at driving outcomes from any of the tools that you've purchased. Which means you are more price conscious. Like you said, it's not just the subscription-based tools, but it's also going to be usage-based pricing. So the SKUs also have changed, and that's something that all of us should also look to note. Which brings me to the next question, right? The funding winter came in only now, a couple of years back. Whereas the timing or the timelines were very different when it was 2020. We were all a little, uncertain about what would happen during the pandemic, but what really happened for the SaaS business, it really boomed. And now a bit of a market correction is happening, which is where, I wanted to ask my next question, right? In terms of how has the market forces influenced pricing post-pandemic and beyond?
So first, I think pricing decision needs to be very swift. And we've seen, according to the latest industry reports for private equity and venture capital-backed companies, that they have not managed to keep the pace with rising inflation in comparison with pure companies that have invested heavily in advanced pricing capabilities, such as tools, data analytics, and people. And also centralized pricing capabilities, because in our view, an efficient pricing function comprises 3 components. First, this is like I mentioned, centralized pricing. Second, advanced data and analytics. And 3, last but not least, of course, specialized workforce. And all of the 3 components are instrumental in implementing pricing strategies, both swiftly and efficiently. And also at Payhawk, we've realized that all pricing decisions needs to be within a centralized pricing team that support sales reps, rather than granting substantial autonomy to sales individuals in determining pricing, discounts, and other pricing adjustments. And yeah, we've implemented actually this approach since 2022 to have a specialized pricing function and introducing a dedicated deal desk for all custom deals. And also our pricing strategy is being reviewed on a quarterly basis. And the process is very comprehensive. We involve multiple teams' feedback, we iterate a lot, and we do use the latest historical data on deals, win rates, loss reasons, etc. And as a third point, I would mention that we see increasing importance of educating the commercial and sales teams about margins and profitability.
Got it.
Yeah, pricing essentially needs to be a strategic priority to grow revenue and at higher margins, not only revenue. And at Payhawk, we've realized that it's rather important for sales reps to understand how different pricing strategies affect our top line and margins, not only the top line. And this is essential portion of our pricing strategy.
Got it. And I think the last point you mentioned is something I resonate with. So I've been working with a lot of account executives, and sometimes, a lot of us don't realize, giving out discounts. It's month end, it's quarter end. Let's just give out the discounts. But discussions with finance leaders can be really helpful here, right? Like where you understand the metrics like your customer acquisition cost, your margins, and so on, which gives you a clearer picture where in terms of the business, why it's important to be priced at a certain way. So thank you so much for that. And that's something that even I'm learning. So definitely
Exactly.
that's a great insight. And
And the
yeah.
finance teams are allergic to the word discount. So
I'm going to take note of this as well. And I just really like the other point you mentioned as well, right? From a team structure setup. So what we've seen in the past is where each of the individual departments go ahead, evaluate the product, put in the credit card, and just buy. You made a very important point about having a centralized team. Whether you're having this team internally or whether you're outsourcing this process, the fact that someone is responsible for that KPI really helps. And it's not that, hey, I just have a requirement, I'm putting in my credit card, we're making the payment, and you don't really know what is happening beyond that. So having a central system of record is a great start, which also brings me to the next question, right? So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the current year, given that we've made some mistakes in the past, the market correction is still ongoing. So what are some of the trends that you see in this year and in the months to come?
yeah, so we've come to realize that there is no one size fits all pricing strategy. So it's supposed to be an even more creative and iterative exercise. And yeah, we do see also an increasing number of investors who expect companies to start designing pricing strategies along and the same time with their go-to-market strategy, not afterwards. So this is really important as a key takeaway from the whole environment. And second, of course, we couldn't afford mentioning AI. Of course, AI companies will most probably bring innovation to pricing models. And yeah, I suppose AI integrated products and services will continue to bring disruption to the software industry, and not only, which will naturally lead to some kind of a disruption and innovation in pricing models themselves.
Got it. And I guess the AI bug is everywhere, and we are not going to get away from it as well. So definitely this is something to watch out for. One thing that Daniel, I've noticed from my own experience at Spendflo, basically what we are doing is we are buying a lot of SaaS for different companies. What we've noticed over the last few months is that a number of companies in the SaaS business have hiked their prices. So how do you think from a buyer's standpoint, how do I look to get through this process or ensure that I'm prepared for a price hike, or how is the best way for me to deal with it? Given that finance budgets are tight, you've already given me a budget at the start of the year, and then I get a surprise from a vendor saying that, hey, we've increased the prices. This tool is essential for me, but then the price hike has happened. So what do you suggest is how from a buyer's perspective is how to deal with the situation?
Yeah, from a buyer's perspective, we keep getting these kind of surprises all the time. But yeah, what we do at Payhawk, we typically adopt a dual strategy based on the vendor. For crucial vendors, of course, our goal is to establish multi-year contracts and try to fix prices for an extended duration. In the case of non-critical vendors, we do explore numerous options. For example, request paid trials, reassess the arrangement every 12 months. And yeah, of course, this sounds trivial, but being well informed about the market and the particular strengths and weaknesses of key market players, this positions you very well in the negotiation phase and allows you to have more favorable prices. We do see a lot of companies, potential companies, to use this very similar approach when they are evaluating, for example, an expense management solution such as Payhawk. They do their homework. But as a key takeaway here, probably implementing a full-fledged software management tool such as Spendflo, or this can really provide value through real-time vendor pricing, quote comparison tables, for example, contract and vendor management. This is a very efficient way to optimize costs of your software stack, and it's an essential part of the CFO office, same as an expense management tool.
Got it. Got it. I think that's something that a lot of our users can take back as well. I made my notes, which I just would like to expand a little bit into this a little deeper, right? So from a finance leader's perspective, what do you think can be like an optimized procurement strategy, keeping the long term and the short term goals in mind? So you would have revenue goals. At the same time, you would also have a goal to move towards profitability. So where does software procurement fit into this? And how should I optimize for this, keeping my long-term and short-term goals in mind?
Yeah, procurement planning is also a very important part of the overall cost optimization strategy of every company. So yeah, my advice would be to develop, let's say, a 360 strategic procurement planning strategy, which should be clearly aligned with your goals and to cover the entire procurement life cycle, meaning contract management, inventory management, subscription management, PO, and procure to pay. And second one is to keep your tech stack under control at all times. I was surprised to learn that tech stack is usually the top three of the largest expense items after headcount and marketing expenses in a typical SaaS business. And yeah, of course, optimizing these costs is essential. And yeah, I've learned that the typical SaaS business has on average of 250 software subscriptions, and this costs the business around $2 million in US dollars for every year on them. So yeah, at Payhawk, what we do, we review our software stack both centrally and on a cost center level every quarter with our procurement department and the cost center owners, monitor effective usage, and always have at least 2-3 different proposals from competitors so we can benchmark accordingly.
Got it. Got it. So clearly the key takeaway would be to keep monitoring your expenses on a quarterly basis at least, where whether it's through your internal team or through an outsourced team, you would want to ensure, okay, what are my expenses, how has they grown, or how can I take care of them? So I think that's something that we need to be mindful of, and which needs to be a continuous process and part of your strategy, which is great, right? So which is more in terms of what perspective it has to be from how do I strategize when I am the seller. So that's great. Now again, coming back to the buyer's perspective, right? So like from a seller's perspective, these are some of the things we do. Now from the buyer's perspective is where it also becomes important. We are running after hefty revenue targets. We have certain goals to meet, so we need to ensure that while we have our revenue goals, our pricing also needs to be realistic. And at the end of the day, be it the buyer and the seller, it needs to be a win-win situation for both. So if you can give 3 things that you feel is important for a company to adopt, so that both the vendor and the customer feels that, okay, it's a win-win situation on both sides. If you can just list, say, about 3 points and tell us, that will be great, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very fragile balance, but I would say number one, always manage expectations from both sides. And number two, needs and goals needs to be clearly identified. So if you're, of course, selling something that is not valuable to the counterparty, you can hardly do a win-win situation for both sides. And as a third, let's say, item, I would say transparency on major pricing components. So transparency is key. So all parties are well aware what they're paying for and why.
Absolutely. And I guess transparency is key, right? Because end of the day, I do not want any surprises. I've already paid the bill at the start of the year. I do not want to come at a surprise. Yeah, 6 months down the line saying, hey, one, I've increased the price, or you've used beyond the limit that you were assigned. So you need to be transparent right at the start with regards to what is your licensing cost, what is your overages cost, and so on. So and in terms of a seller as well, right? Like I've got the best results when I'm super honest with my clients from day one in terms of what is the service, what we're offering, what are the payment structure related to it, and what is our goals. So totally agree with the points you made there. Now, just coming on to the last question that I had, and then I'll pass it to the audience to ask any other questions if they did. Is again, so you are end of the day, you are a finance leader, right? So I would believe you would think more from the buyer standpoint because ultimately the budget sits with you and it becomes your responsibility. So there are multiple KPIs that you need to take care of. You are going to have folks from multiple teams saying, "Hey, if I need to be successful, I need this to happen," which means there's going to be a cost associated to it. But at the same time, there's a board pressure. Investors have told you, okay, this is the goals that we're looking at, and we're looking to look be cash flow positive as quickly as possible. So at from your end, it becomes about balancing and managing expectations at both ends. So I just want to understand, right? Like going into this year, what would your top priorities be, and what would your advice be to other finance and procurement leaders for 2024?
In terms of top priority, I would say probably number one is delivering value, because our role as a finance and procurement professional is to be an effective business partner to the business and deliver value. As a second, let's say cost optimization, of course, like you mentioned, you need to optimize costs at all times and prioritize initiatives based on their potential return on investment. Of course, automation is key. Implementing new tools and investing in data and analytics so you can monitor usage, you can optimize, and yeah, this is also really important in every domain. As a fourth one, I would say contingency planning as well, because especially for critical vendors, if you have bottlenecks with them, this is like a ticking time bomb, and both teams need to have a plan in place, both finance and procurement. So contingency planning is also essential. And last but not least is usually neglected, but it's operational efficiency. Just standardize and streamline processes, approvals, and workflows. So everything is clear with a clear counterparty, stakeholders, decision process, and yeah, it makes operation so much easier. So as a wrap up, like delivering value, cost optimization, automation, contingency planning, and yeah, operational efficiency.
Perfect. Perfect. I think this makes a lot of sense, right? Like you've summarized what I asked you. You also mentioned a few places which are necessary investments. At the same time, you've also found out ways in which you need to cut down and increase efficiency. So it's always a balance, and that's great, right? Like in terms of how do you maintain that, because that is what is going to take you towards the goal of growing sustainably. So that's great insights again, Daniel. Thank you so much on that. So I guess that's it about I think more or less from me. I am going to open the floor for questions now. Audience, if you have any questions, this is the time. Daniel's usually a busy guy. I got him here, so make sure you ask all the questions you have.
Of course, happy to answer some questions from the audience if there are any.
Yeah. So there is one question that I have, Daniel, like someone from the audience has asked this. I'm just going to read it out. Maybe covered, but what tools and processes should you use to manage global pricing effectively? And what elements can be automated?
So from our perspective, what we do, as I mentioned previously, we do review our pricing strategy on a quarterly basis. And we, of course, try to test different scenarios, meaning that we test fixed and variable components change within our pricing strategy and try to examine how sensitive and elastic these are across different regions, let's say, or different segments. And for that, we are using data from our warehouse and Tableau as well with our BI team. So I would suggest not a particular tool, but a particular approach to be able to test multiple scenarios with different pricing strategies. And so you can just see the elasticity and sensitivity of your pricing and how this would affect your top line, of course, and your gross margin.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. There's one more question from the audience again. So what should be some of the innovative approaches or technologies influencing pricing strategies in the SaaS industry this year?
So yeah, I'll again mention AI tools. As we mentioned before, I would guess a practical, let's say, implementation of AI tools is yet to come into this domain as well. So this will be one of the sources of innovation. And also, I would imagine that the tech industry will be again at the forefront of trying new things and innovating with pricing strategies because, as we mentioned, companies in our sector are growing very fast. So scaling very fast and growing in this rate requires you to be more agile, more adaptive, and rather than reactive. And of course, testing different pricing strategies, testing different tools, ways to automate is a prerequisite for success. So.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Perfect. There's one more question. How much value do you think is left on the table in terms of unused functionality? Software often changes throughout the term, but do you think users are aware? So it's about what you've purchased versus what you're actually using. So if you could just add some thought on that.
It's a sizable chunk. I would assume we've also at Payhawk tested internally and analyzed a lot of times usage on different systems which are intertwined across different departments. And we've do seen some extreme cases for teams that have been underutilizing tools a lot. Of course, it varies from case by case basis, but I would say I've seen cases with around 25 to 30% under usage, which is a lot of dollars left on the table for sure.
Absolutely. And I can second to that thought as well, right? So even we work with a lot of clients, and one of the key things that we do as a business is also look at how much is being purchased versus how much is being used. And in a number of cases, it's very clear. Okay, the last time this person would have logged in is probably 2 or 3 months back, which means clearly there's no usage, and there is great amount of money that is being left on the table there. The second aspect of the question was also software often changes throughout the term, but do you think the users are aware? So how do you make effective change management, Daniel? So in terms of, okay, there is new softwares that are being added. So how would your users be informed about it? And how do you kind of push for adaptability there?
Increase activity for the new software, you mean?
Yeah, like how do we make them aware that, okay, hey, okay, we've launched Payhawk, so that's going to be a new expense management software. So how do you think the company should be informed about it, and how should adoption be pushed for it?
So that's an interesting question. In our case, it's a very defined strategy which takes a lot of time for, let's say, different kind of users to adopt these new software tools that can simplify your life. As I mentioned, we are strongly targeted on the CFO office, and it's an overall expense management from travel to software to whatever you name it. And we do see that for every software solution, you need a very specific and, let's say, tailor-made solution engineer on board who, could raise awareness and help the team to see value, because sometimes, there is a discrepancy between the buyer and the seller. Let's say the buyer is an accountant or a controller, and the seller is a pure sales rep with tech background. And sometimes there is a disconnect between them. I mean, they are speaking a similar language, but they're not speaking the same language. So it's very useful to have a, let's say, a controller, someone with a controller background or someone with a relevant background on the buyer to help the buyer make the best decision. Of course, specific marketing awareness, this goes without saying, but yeah, there is someone to bridge this gap.
Got it. This a couple of other questions, but I guess we'll take one last question, and we wouldn't want to hold you for too long, Daniel. So I think this is an interesting question, especially this is something that I've seen a lot of people with the finance stack go through as well, where the question is, how would you handle a renewal where the business is completely dependent on, so it's a tool where your business is completely dependent on, and the vendor operates in monopoly. So there could be a tool where it's there are only one or two players in the market, or someone you are comfortable with. In this kind of a situation, how do you go about handling this entire renewal to get the best out of it? So in this situation, threat of removal and contingency planning often seems ineffective, right? So you can't really say I'm going to a different partner and so on. So how do you kind of deal or negotiate with this kind of a partner? What would your strategy be from a finance leader's perspective here?
Yeah, this is usually when we're having a hard time, and I've seen a lot of cases like this with, as you mentioned, business critical vendors. I mean, this is where we, of course, you cannot, and yeah, this approach we can go with another vendor is, let's say, working most of the time, but it's not the usual. I mean, this is what the vendor expects to hear. So it's better to try to collaborate and say, hey guys, we are of course a growing company. We have a tight budget, and we have investors to report. We have cost efficiency to report, and yeah, I would just approach it that way. That I mean, for the sake of our partnership, let's try to negotiate the price, or let's say let's lock additional users or additional, let's say, another year. If you make us a discount or something, I mean, just try to partner with the vendor and see from their perspective. And usually people are very, let's say, open to these kind of discussions, because you're not being negative, you're not being, let's say, you're being respectful. So yeah, it's not working 100% of the time, but this is, let's say, what we try to do usually. Because yeah, I mean, if this partnership is so critical, we will be partnering with this vendor, let's say, for another 5 to 10 years. So why break the partnership just over a couple of hundreds or thousands of bucks, let's say?
Got it. Got it. Got it. I think that's a great point you've made, right? And just to add to what you've said, one thing I've also noticed, or in cases where there are not a lot of competition to a particular vendor and it's business critical, it's always best to get into an early renewal as well, where if your renewal is up, start negotiating or talking to them at least 90 to 120 days in advance. And as a seller, which I am in most cases, I'm always open to conversations that happen earlier, where there's intent. So when there is intent, uh, you know, from a seller standpoint, you're more open to listening to what the buyer has to say, and reach a situation where it's win-win for both. So, of course, I guess like you said, the partnership will always be a long term. You'll give them plans on how to go about it in terms of what you are planning with regards to headcount. And the other thing is taking enough time to actually work on the negotiation. So yeah, I think
Very good point.
perfect, right? Thank you so much, Daniel. I think it's been great. Uh, you've taken out the time for patiently answering all the questions that I had, and then of course what the audience had. I would also like to thank the audience. I think this was one of the more engaging webinars that I've been part of. So this is where we'll call it quits. So thank you so much once again to Daniel and the entire a group of people who've gathered here. I hope the session was insightful. We will be recording the session as well. So the session is recorded. So if you guys are planning to go back and take any more insights, feel free to do so after this. So yeah, thank you so much and have a great day then. Bye.
Thank you, Siddhant, for having me. Thank you for a good talk.
Absolutely. Pleasure, Daniel. Thank you.